Federal monitors question New Orleans Police Department's internal affairs process in court after finding 9 possible violations of the consent decree regarding the investigation into Officer Jeffrey Vappie.
This comes as the city's battling to get out from under the consent decree. Josh Robertson is live at federal court.
Well, John Kelsey, the PIB investigation into Officer Vappie was concluded back in March, and he was given a letter of reprimand after a series of Fox 8 stories found Vappie spending long hours inside of a city-owned apartment with Mayor LaToya Cantrell, both on and off the clock. But yesterday, attorneys for the feds argued that that investigation was tainted and that they may have violated the very consent decree that the city is now arguing in court to get out from under. Now, they say that not considering payroll fraud and by not interviewing the mayor in that investigation, the entire investigation was tainted from the onset. The monitors were also critical of the NOPD's alleged slow walking of providing information and documents to the monitors as required in the consent decree before an investigation concludes. And the monitors report also found fault in PIB not considering circumstantial evidence and the possibility of a personal relationship existing between the mayor and Vappie. Now, the city responded to the monitors' findings, accusing the monitoring team, the federal monitors, of playing politics, being over-involved in the Vappie investigation, and saying the city does not have to provide the report to the monitors ahead of time if serious misconduct is not being investigated, which according to the city, it was not. Now, the city attorney argued that despite pressure from the federal monitors for a predetermined outcome, the PIB investigators did a thorough job, and he questioned federal monitor John Aroney's integrity.
I'm a federal monitor. I've been doing this for 10 years. No one's ever questioned my integrity before, but he's going to say what he's going to say, and we'll let the facts and the reports speak for themselves.
Stay in their lane, stay focused on the consent decree, and if we do that, and if they do that, they will get to the place where I am. I know that we're at a place of substantial completion, and of course, when you think about just some of the areas that they're zoning in on in terms of bias-free policing is one of them. And then getting outside of the lane relative to investigations and being biased.
Those court proceedings will continue next Wednesday when oral arguments will be heard in the case as the city continues to battle to get out from under the federal consent decree. But for now, reporting live here in New Orleans, Josh Robertson, Fox 8 Local First.